My husband left me on a Tuesday. Not a Friday, when at least the weekend could absorb the shock. Not a Sunday, when you might expect a life-altering conversation after too much silence and too much coffee. A Tuesday. At 7:14 in the morning. While I was still in my bathrobe, holding a mug of tea that was too hot to drink, watching him pull a rolling suitcase toward the front door like he was catching a flight. "I'm leaving, Rachel," he said. "I'm sorry." That was it. No build-up. No argument. No dramatic scene to explain it later when people asked what happened. Just Marcus. And a suitcase. And the front door closing behind him with a quiet, final click that I still hear sometimes in the space between sleep and waking. I stood in my kitchen until the tea went cold. And then I found out why he left. That part was worse than the leaving. Let me tell you about Marcus first. Because this story only makes sense if you understand what kind of man he was, not a monster, not a villain, but something in certain ways harder to process than either of those things. Marcus was good-looking in a way that had always made him slightly aware of it. Not vain exactly, more like someone who had been told enough times that he was special that he had come to quietly expect the world to treat him that way. We had met at 24. Married at 27. I was a pediatric nurse. He was in sales, good at it, naturally charming, the kind of person who made clients feel like they were the only person in the room. He made decent money. Not extraordinary money. Decent. I had loved him for his laugh and his ambition and the way he talked about the future like it was a place he was genuinely excited to arrive at. I had loved him for 9 years. 9 years. In 9 years, I had worked double shifts so he could take a risk on a new sales position that didn't pan out. I had moved cities, twice, for his career. I had put off conversations about having children because he always had a reason why the timing wasn't quite right. I had been the stable foundation beneath his restlessness because I believed, completely and without reservation, that we were building towards something. I found out what we had actually been building toward on the Wednesday after he left. My friend Dana called me. Her voice had the particular careful quality of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say. "Rachel," she said. "I need to tell you something and I need you to sit down first." Her name was Vivian Cole. She was 43. A real estate developer. Divorced, no children. A net worth that, according to the article Dana had found, a profile in a regional business magazine from 6 months earlier, was somewhere in the vicinity of $14 million. Marcus had been seeing her for 8 months. 8 months. I did the math sitting at my kitchen table. 8 months ago, we had celebrated our 9th wedding anniversary at a restaurant he had chosen, where he had given me a bracelet and told me the next decade was going to be the best one yet. 8 months ago. I put my phone face down on the table and I sat very still for a long time. The weeks that followed were the kind that leave marks. Marcus had moved into Vivian's house, a 6-bedroom modern property on the good side of the city that I had driven past once, purely by accident, and which looked like something from an architecture magazine. He sent me a formal email, through a lawyer, about the division of assets within 10 days of leaving. 10 days. 9 years of marriage and he had a lawyer drafted before the sheets on our bed were cold. What I had was the house, our house, a 3-bedroom colonial on Maple Street that I loved and that needed a new roof, and that was, on my nurse's salary alone, going to be a stretch. I had my car. I had my job. I had a savings account that was modest but real. And I had my friends. Dana and Priya and my colleague Joanna, who showed up at my door on the second Saturday with wine and takeout containers and absolutely no expectation that I'd be okay, which was the most generous thing anyone had done for me in years. I cried a lot in those first weeks. I am not going to pretend otherwise. I cried in my car before shifts because I didn't want my patients to see it. I cried in the shower where the sound didn't carry. I cried once, memorably, in the cereal aisle of the grocery store, Because we had always bought the same brand of granola and I didn't know whether to buy it for one person or not at all. But I also worked. And I kept the house. And I called my mother every Sunday. And I went to a therapist named Dr. Okafor who was warm and direct and who said something in our third session that I wrote in my journal and have not forgotten. Grief and relief can coexist. You are allowed to mourn what you lost and also notice what you've been released from. I held on to that. 6 months after Marcus left, something happened that I had not been expecting. I got a promotion. Not just any promotion, a senior clinical coordinator position at the hospital. More responsibility, yes. Significantly better pay. And something else, visibility. The kind of visibility that, over the following year, put me in rooms I hadn't been in before. Hospital board meetings. Community health initiatives. A regional nursing conference where I presented a paper on pediatric patient outcomes that I had spent 18 months researching in every spare hour I had. I had written that paper while Marcus was working late. Or so I had believed. I had written it in the evenings, at the kitchen table, on the good side of our house where the light lasted longest. I had written it because I cared about it, not because I expected it to lead anywhere. It led somewhere. The paper was well received. Then it was published in a professional journal. Then I was invited to speak about it at 2 more conferences. I stood at a podium in a hotel ballroom in October, a year and 2 months after Marcus had rolled his suitcase out my front door, and I looked out at 300 people who had come to hear what I had to say. And I thought, I built this. This was always mine. He was never part of this. I want to tell you about the phone call now. Because this is where the story turns. It came on a Friday evening, 16 months after Marcus left. I was making dinner, pasta, a glass of wine, music on the speaker, the kind of Friday evening that had taken me a full year to learn to enjoy alone, and which I had come, gradually, genuinely, to love. My phone showed his name. I stared at it for 3 full rings. Then I answered. Because I had done enough work on myself to be curious rather than afraid of what he might say. Rachel. His voice was different. Quieter. Stripped of the easy confidence that had always been its most recognizable quality. I'm sorry to call without warning. Marcus, I said. Evenly. What is it? A long pause. Vivian ended it, he said. 3 weeks ago. I set down my wooden spoon. Here it comes, said something quiet and clear inside me. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Which was not entirely untrue. I had worked hard enough on myself that I did not actually wish him misery. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said. About us. About what I did. Another pause. I made a terrible mistake, Rachel. I threw away the best thing in my life and I know that now and I need to know if there's any chance. Any possibility. The pasta water began to boil behind me. I turned it down. And I thought, very carefully, about what to say. Here is what I did not do. I did not slam the phone down. I did not cry. I did not say something sharp and satisfying that I would have to pay for emotionally later. I did not feel the rush of triumph I had half imagined feeling in this moment during the darker weeks of the previous year. What I felt was something quieter and more complicated than any of those things. I felt sad. Not for myself, the sadness was for him. For what he had done to his own life, chasing something shiny and arriving at the other side of it empty-handed. For the version of him that had once been the man I fell in love with, before whatever restlessness had been living in him had finally broken everything apart. Marcus, I said. Can I ask you something honestly? Yes, he said. Immediately. Desperate. Why did you leave? A long silence. Vivian she had everything I thought I wanted, he said. The money, the life, the freedom to, he stopped. I convinced myself that I had outgrown what we had. that I deserved something bigger. And? I said. And it was nothing, he said. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. It was beautiful and exciting for about 4 months, and then it was nothing. She wasn't unkind, Rachel. But she didn't know me. And I realized, slowly, that she didn't want to. I was something she had acquired. Something that fit a certain picture. And when the picture got inconvenient, I was just gone. I listened to him describe the thing he had done to me, from the inside, and I understood it completely. Because I had been the Rachel in that story. The stable one. The foundation. The person who was always there until one day the person who had relied on you decided they deserved something that sparkled more. The difference was, I was not going to let that define me. I hear you, I said. I believe that you're sorry. I genuinely believe that. Then, hope in his voice, fragile and real. Marcus, I said gently. I'm going to tell you something and I need you to hear it as what it is, not cruelty, just truth. Okay, he said. The woman you left 16 months ago needed you, I said. She had built her life around yours, and when you took it away, she had to figure out from scratch who she was without it. I paused. And she did. I did. I got a promotion. I published research I am proud of. I stood at a podium in front of 300 people and I was good. My voice was steady. I was aware of how steady it was. I have built something real and mine in the last 16 months. Something I am not willing to dismantle. I'm not asking you to. You're asking me to let you back in, I said. And what I'm telling you is that the person you want to come back to doesn't exist anymore. She's been replaced by someone better. And that person doesn't need you to complete her. Silence. Long, honest, real silence. That's fair, he said finally. Quietly. I hope you find your way through this, I said. I genuinely do. But I'm not the path. I want to tell you what I felt after I hung up. I went back to my pasta. I finished making dinner. I poured my glass of wine. I sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where I had written my research paper in all those evening hours, and I ate. And then, halfway through the meal, something unexpected happened. I started to cry. Not from grief. Not from regret. Not from anything as simple as sadness. I cried because it was over. Truly, completely, finally over, not when he left, not when the lawyer's email arrived, not even when I had gotten through enough sessions with Dr. Okafor to stop crying in grocery stores. It was over now. In this kitchen. With this pasta. I cried because I had stood at the exact moment I had imagined for months, the moment he came back, and I had been okay. Better than okay. I had been free. I want to tell you about the year that followed. Not in exhaustive detail, because real life resists that. But the shape of it. I bought a new roof for the house on Maple Street. Paid for it myself, from my own account, and stood in the driveway afterward looking up at it like it was a trophy. I adopted a dog, a ridiculous, enormous, deeply loving golden retriever named Biscuit who had been in the shelter for 8 months and who treats every morning like it is the greatest morning that has ever occurred in the history of mornings. He sleeps at the foot of my bed and accompanies me to the end of the driveway every morning like a very enthusiastic security detail. I went to Italy with Dana for 2 weeks. Not a consolation prize trip. Not a healing journey in the self-conscious sense. Just 2 women who had known each other for 20 years, eating extraordinary food in extraordinary places, laughing until our faces hurt, and calling it exactly what it was, joy. I started dating again. Slowly. Without urgency. A few first dates that didn't lead anywhere, 1 second date that didn't lead anywhere, and then, 6 months ago, a man named Thomas who teaches high school history and coaches the debate team and brings me coffee the way I like it without having to be told twice. I am not going to tell you he is perfect. He is not. He is wonderfully, complicatedly, specifically imperfect in ways that are entirely his own and that I have found, to my ongoing surprise, deeply endearing. What I will tell you is that he has never, not once, made me feel like a foundation he was standing on while he looked for something higher to climb toward. He looks at me like I am the higher ground. That is new. And it is enough. More than enough. Marcus, from what I understand through the careful distance of mutual acquaintances, is doing all right. He moved into a smaller apartment on the east side. He is still in sales. He has, by several accounts, become someone more quietly thoughtful than the man I was married to. I don't know if that is true. I hope it is. I don't think about him very much. That is not performance. That is just what happens when you do the work, the real work of rebuilding yourself, not around the absence of someone but around the presence of your own life. He becomes, gradually, just a chapter. Not the whole book. There is something I want to say before I finish. Something I said to my friend Priya last spring when she was going through her own version of this, her own quiet devastation, and she called me asking what I had learned. I told her this. The worst moment, the moment he left, the moment you find out about her, the moment the lawyer's email arrives, the moment the granola is one person's granola now, that moment is also the first moment of something else. You cannot see it from inside the pain. I know you cannot see it. But it is there. On the other side of losing the life you thought you had is the terrifying, wide-open space where your actual life gets to begin. It does not feel like freedom at first. It feels like nothing. Like the light is wrong and the sounds are too loud and your hands don't know what to do with themselves without the familiar shape of the life you had been holding. But if you keep going, if you work and cry and work and get a therapist and let your friends feed you takeout on a Saturday and write the research paper at the kitchen table just because you care about it, something builds. Quietly. Without fanfare. Something that is entirely, uncompromisingly, beautifully yours. And one Friday evening, you will be making pasta in your own kitchen with your ridiculous dog asleep on your feet and music on the speaker, and your phone will ring with the name of the man who left you, and you will answer it, and you will be okay. More than okay. You will be someone he cannot reach anymore. Not because you hardened. Not because you shut something off. Because you filled up. All the space he left behind, you filled it. With your work and your friends and your roof and your dog and your 2 weeks in Italy and your ordinary extraordinary Tuesday evenings in the life that is yours now. And when someone tries to walk back into that fullness, there is simply no room. To anyone who is in the empty part right now, the part that feels like nothing, I promise you, you are building something. Even now. Even today. Keep going. The fullness is coming.